Bummer.
Yeah.
Not really.
Okay.
Okay, we are recording.
All right. Let's start the meeting at 3:20 or 3:21. The agenda was up, I think, a little bit. Now it's gone.
Yeah, I'll get it up there for you. Let's see here.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. How you, Karen?
Oh,
Good. I can see your face when you're looking for an unmute button.
It is. I'm like, there's so many different platforms. Every one of them's different. I was on
Thank
a
you.
Zoom and a Google this morning. I'm like, different.
Yep.
Teams is the worst.
my share button is gone. There it is.
The other thing I've noticed, I use 3 screens, so I'm never talking and looking at the right one at the right time.
Greg, do you see the
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I see a meeting agenda. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I welcomed and started the meeting. Do we have the minutes to put up?
We have the minutes. Let me get those little puppies up there. Do you see the minutes?
Mm-hmm.
I do now, yes.
They're nothing controversial. They basically said we talked and didn't make any decisions.
Right.
Short and sweet. So if anybody needs extra time to look at them. If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion from Sarah Lynn, second, anyone? Anyone?
I'll say
Who is that?
Bruce.
Bruce. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any opposed? So, anyone in favor of it? Raise your hand. Aye. Okay, all right, minutes are passed. Thank you.
Okay. So you want me to pull up the
Yeah, I guess
document?
back to the recommendations, yeah.
Oops. Do you see the document?
Yes,
Great. Yay.
that's a little better, all right.
I can make it a little bit bigger as well. A little bit better.
So it looks like, well, you go ahead. Looks like what you've done is some things that are scratched out in yellow, and go ahead and explain, I guess.
Yeah, and then it was just easier to put Karen's name on everything to show what we did last time.
You were just logged in on my account together. So far the changes that were made, correct me if I'm wrong, Diane, are just what was said in last meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
Which, and I will scroll down. I highlighted this because I think somebody said that we don't want to talk about this stuff right now, maybe. So I highlighted that. I did not mark it that there was a recommend for a change. I just highlighted it for discussion purposes. Let's see, and I think that was it.
This was not mailed out to us before, right?
Yes, it was.
Oh, it was?
Mhm.
I apologize. I didn't remember seeing it. Okay.
Yeah, I sent it out with the invite and sent it out with a separate email.
Okay.
But I think the big change, the big discussion was the name of the document and to change tenant or leasee to landlord, property owner, or leaseor. And to just talk about multifamily, and that's it, the only focus.
To focus on multifamily first.
Correct.
And then since I was saying when we were looking at when we were making the changes from the previous meeting, that the definition, the responsible party is a term that is defined. So it just seemed that throughout the rest of it, we could just say the responsible party and not have to keep putting anything about landlord, property owner, or lessor, but because it seemed like that would be the point.
I know how to interpret overstruck copy and bracketed copy, but the pink versus the yellow is confusing to me. And more importantly, to me, it's one thing if you have, say, a small project, maybe condos or something, where each tenant contracts for their services, but in large multifamily, it really should be the landlord, oughtn't it?
Well, I think that in the definition, it's whoever arranges with the hauler for the service that we're talking to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing, it says the tenant or leasee, so responsible party would be the tenant or leasee, depending on who's appropriate.
Right.
Then it says parenthetically landlord, property owner, or lessor.
But go ahead, Karen. I'm so sorry.
I was just going to suggest, first of all, the pink and the blue is only because it was me signed in or Diane signed in, making the changes. So if I wonder, Diane, if you should actually change it to where we view no markup.
Okay.
I mean,
Yes.
if everyone agrees, so then we don't see old stuff.
Yeah, it's too confusing any other way.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know why that one's blue. There's no markup. Oh.
And so what does yellow represent again?
That was just highlighted so everybody could see the suggestion of, instead of being tenant or leasee as landlord, property owner, and lessor. I can take that out. Would you like me to take that out? But
Oh, I'm thinking. So we have these discussions so infrequently, I forget things, but this does not apply to condominiums. It only applies to rental property. Is that correct?
multifamily residential.
To me, that includes condos.
Sarah Lynn.
Therefore, is there a term that needs to be added there or?
Right.
Well, I think that this document ought to, before you even get to definitions, have some sort of a scope statement saying it applies to, for example, rented multifamily or if you just say multifamily, then I think it means condos. And I think we should go ahead and say that we mean rented or owned multifamily, because multifamily is an architectural term. When I look out my window here, there's all kinds of what historically were apartment buildings, but now some of them are condos and some of them are apartments. And as far as getting business done, I don't think it matters, but as far as regulating them, it does. At least historically, the city has made a distinction.
Is this something for us to ponder back and forth or turn over to legal like we've done for other things? Or, I don't know.
Well, I think we should start with what did we intend? You could also, instead of having a scope or an applicability clause at the beginning, you could have a second definition for multifamily in this case.
Are we trying to cover everybody who's not covered in the single family, whatever else we have going on right now?
I asked you first.
But I guess, yeah, we'd have to have a limit on it.
I mean, I am pretty confident that this function of metro government has made a distinction between condos and rented property before, and maybe there's a definition we could swipe.
Yeah, that's why I was hoping to maybe, like I said,
Yeah.
legal or somebody.
Yeah, but as far as for our discussion for the rest of the day, we ought to be clear on what we're talking about too.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
so
unless,
then what do you suggest that multifamily should mean?
Well, I think a multifamily again is an architectural term, so I think we ought to say something like rented or leased multifamily in order to really get to the people we're talking about as best as I understand it. But if indeed we meant to include condos, please say, somebody should speak up.
Would condos have a different waste management system?
Not necessarily, but my understanding is that the way Metro treats your rights to services is a function of whether you are a renter or a property owner. And that condos are actually treated by Metro much more like a single family home because the occupant owns the property.
Okay, but we're talking about waste management. We're talking about something bigger than the urban services district.
I know,
So-
but I mean, it's like when we say you have to offer recycling services, it's a function of, well, here's a better way to say it, I guess. Well, not, if you want to go outside the urban services district, I think we have one set of rules for condos versus rented multifamily housing, do we not?
That's an excellent question, because if we do, you're right, we should separate it.
Right.
What kind of rules?
Well, it's something like, the roll carts, that if you live in a multifamily building, but it's been made into condominiums and the occupants own them, they are eligible for roll carts if there's X number of units or fewer, is my understanding. And that if it gets to be more than that number of units, then the homeowners association is supposed to make arrangements for those kind of services, because it's impractical for a whole bunch of people to have separate roll carts.
Yeah,
Not
I mean, that there is wording in the ordinance about the urban services district, and 8 or fewer units are eligible for city waste collection.
In the case
And
of condos or rented or both.
well, that's all it talks about, really. The condominiums are, I can't remember if it's worded in the ordinance, but they're usually looked at kind of on a case-by-case basis because of the infrastructure.
Right.
And some actually are on a dumpster, a recycling dumpster service, but the city does, thank you, Brandon. But the city does take care of that dumpster service for recycling.
Well, it just seems to me that we've got to be super clear about who we're talking about here. And I don't know why I haven't thought of this sooner.
Well, according to what Brandon just sent from our ordinance, it says that the definition of a multifamily residential property is a residential building with 9 or more dwelling units. So that means we're talking about the ones that even like in the urban services district would not have our city waste services provided.
If they had 9 or more. Right?
And it doesn't say whether they're rental or owned, right? So it doesn't distinguish between rental and condo.
Okay, so maybe if that makes sense to use here, that like occupancy type A5 needs to say 9 or more dwelling units, because the 5 to 9 are going to fall into a different realm, are they not?
Yeah, specifically in the urban services district. I'm not quite sure when you're outside
Yeah.
how that works.
If we had truly metro government, this would be a lot easier.
So it should say in the USD 5 to 9 or 9 and less.
I think that last one should say insert date for premises with 9 or more dwelling units. All right, then in the USD.
Well,
Well,
we
this is-
already have with 10 or more, so we could just change
Yeah.
that to 9 or more and then delete 5.
Okay.
But again, we've got to get clear on whether this is USD or not.
Thought this is covering the whole metro.
Well, I thought it was too, but I also think that I'd say we've bifurcated things, but I think it may be a bit more complicated than that. And we need to think clearly as we're doing this, or we potentially are going to go back and do it again, would be my thought.
Well, if we're trying to propose a requirement, it would be in a dwelling. Well, I guess you're saying it needs to be decided that maybe this requirement would not be for the 8 or fewer units.
Well, I think
Like-
that's what I'm saying. I'm not really arguing what it should be as much as I'm saying I
mean-
think there's ambiguity here that we ought to wrestle with in order to choose things like tenant or lessee versus landlord, property owner, or lessor. That's, I'm not even sure who we're talking about when we get to things like condos, which do fall under the heading of multifamily.
Or, I mean, I
Yeah.
guess I just don't know enough about condos, but
Right.
I know that you can, I guess, purchase a condo, but doesn't it typically still fall under some kind of association?
There's
that
always
would-
an association. There's always somebody running it, and most of the ones I
Yeah.
know contract that service out to somebody, and usually somebody manages that's self-elected through that group.
I mean, I
Right.
think that's generally the case, but as I look out my window, the corner one is 2 condos in one building, and then there's 4 apartments that rent, a single family house, and then an apartment building with 6 units, but it's been turned into a condo. And all of them have roll carts for their trash and their recycling, I guess because they're under 6. But, I think though that if we kept going around, like there's a building right here with more than 9 units, and I don't see roll carts there. So I think we need to get clear on this. I suspect that Pete could rattle this off the top of his head. Is he coming?
No, he's not able to attend today. So if we focus on the 9 or more units, then we are definitely not focusing on roll carts because anybody anywhere would be talking dumpsters at that point.
So maybe for purposes of discussion today, we should assume that we are talking multifamily of at least 9 units, irrespective of whether they are owner occupied or rented. And if that's the assumption we want to operate on, we just have to be broader in our terminology, for example, under the responsible party. My concern is that the broader you make it, the more confusing it is. So we're going to have to add homeowner association in here too.
Yeah.
And you're talking about that whoever holds the contract with the hauling company, correct? Whether it's the city or a separate company.
Yeah, I mean, I would not have used the word hold, but basically from my perspective, it's incumbent upon somebody to sign a contract with a service provider, and it's, who is that somebody that we're trying, initially here, we're trying to describe?
We call it landlord, property owner, or leaser, lesser. I don't know.
Can I interject?
Yeah, please, someone.
Basically, property manager or property owner would be the responsible party. The hauler would be the contractor.
So then we should get rid of tenant, or lessee, and go with landlord, property owner, or lessor. Right? Is that what you're saying, Bruce?
I think you're making it more difficult than it needs to be with using those phrases, but again,
I'll yield. I just think that, if I presume the regulated body will ask the same questions, but I can yield.
most condominiums outside of the urban services district, not the high-rise condos, but the ones that are spread out through it like a community, those are handled through a homeowners association,
Yep.
and then they're contracted out to a hauler. And so that's why I say it's either a property management firm that manages for an owner, or it's the owner itself that would be the responsible party. The owner of the units, if you will.
But I mean, if the if the homeowners association hires a property management company and we've got a problem, I think we would take the homeowners association to task, not the contractor, correct?
That's a good point. I can't argue that point.
Okay.
So if we as staff make note that we want to, by looking maybe at other language and other ordinances or whatever, we just want to make sure that we have the responsible party defined well, and then multifamily defined, and consider condos, because I don't think that has come up before. So, we just need to know that it is or isn't the same, treated the same.
I agree. I don't view it as this subcommittee's responsibility trying to define all this to the nth degree of legality.
But if we're gonna write an ordinance or whatever we're calling this, we have to understand who we're talking about, or we're not able to write it.
Well, I thought we're talking about all these people. It's just we're
Right,
trying to figure out how to
so-
define them properly, which we could do.
We just need to say so. I mean, an applicability clause is very common at the beginning of a law or a regulation. Maybe that's what we need.
If I may add, really, I don't want to interject too much here, but as a subcommittee, we want to bring ideas to the full committee. We can hash out the verbiage in the full committee with,
Right.
assistance of Peter Irvin, if necessary, with regard to legalities. And then once it's hashed out, we can vote on it as a full committee. But I think you guys have a good start going here. It's written.
So,
I agree, and I agree with Bruce, I think.
yeah, so knowing that these are some details that need hashed out, maybe with a little more background. If
Right.
we look at, in this example, it does move on to, like have I guess when you push it out and you have a date where this is when it comes into effect, it's rolled out to where it affects the larger dwelling first. Does that seem like a logical way to go about it?
I think so.
At this point, I don't know, top down or bottom up, whether you start with the little ones or the big ones.
I think the idea is to start with big, so that, because they probably have more resources to make the
Right.
the proposed requirements happen.
Well, and in the history of environmental regulation, we've generally started with the ones making the biggest contribution to the problem. So you could argue They're putting out the most stuff to the landfill just by the nature of how many units they have.
And also, the larger they are, the more space is going to be required for either carts or containers. So,
And probably the more sophisticated
Largest
they
one
are
is
about
first.
getting things done.
So Diane, if we move past occupancy types, what
Mhm.
is next?
We're
Sorry,
halfway
I'm
through our
reading.
time slot.
And then we skip about office, medical,
Mhm.
hotels and stuff because we're focusing on multifamily first.
Why is it in this document with that title then?
This was just sort of pulled from different examples that are just out there to have something to start from. Keep going. Okay, so then there's the section called containers. And again, as we think this through, of course, these sections might be totally different, or maybe there's something to add. But the example here shows containers, and then that the responsible party is going to provide enough containers, which it's written here to make it convenient. I know Sarah Lynn didn't like that last time. For the occupants to dispose of recycling materials. It is recommended that each solid waste garbage container be paired in the same area with a recycling container.
I think practical would be a more defensible word than convenient.
Yeah. I mean, I think the extra sentence about having garbage in the same area is the idea here, that it's not like you're going to put your recycling in the garbage because it's on the way to your parked car. They need to be nearby each other, so it's practical.
Aaron, just to pick your little comment.
Mhm.
Yeah. When you're talking recycling, I don't like to change the words to dispose of recycling materials. I would prefer to see something that says for receipt of recycling materials, something to that effect. Because dispose can be basically confusing.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Brian, I'm so sorry. What did you say?
That was Bruce Burrow.
Bruce,
Bruce
oh,
Brown.
I'm so sorry. Bruce,
Instead of saying dispose, say, what was the word? Dispense? Or
I just said receive or
receipt
receipt.
receipt of recycled materials.
Bruce,
But
we
for
typically
the
use
occupants,
process with that. Process would be a good word.
Beg your pardon, Brian?
Process would be a good word. I can't see the screen, but I'm just
Well,
listening.
right,
Yeah.
I think
I
in
don't
this
know what
for the
case,
occupants to
verbiage is.
process the recycled materials instead of dispose. So get rid of receipt and dispose and make it the occupants to process the recycled materials.
Well,
That's
I
even
don't
better.
think that
what
applies.
about if it's contaminated or if the market falls out or whatever? I mean, you can't
Well,
really.
that's what process means. You process it how you have to process it.
Well, I don't think in this case it applies because we're saying the occupants are going to do this. So it's the person living in an apartment. They're just dropping it.
Yeah, I think the ultimate decision is being made by West Rock or whoever the recipient of the material is.
Right.
But I think we can make a note about the word dispose, and that is understood and agreed that it can be with a connotation for trash, I guess is what you're saying, Bruce, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's why I don't understand. To me, I would change dispose to process. Process doesn't mean any.
Well, I think of processing material as what West Rock does.
Right, me too.
So the other part for containers, aside from making garbage and recycling containers close enough to be practical, providing enough capacity.
Mhm.
which makes sense because you wouldn't want to have overflow.
And do we need to say lidded containers, or is it safe to assume that no hauler is going to offer a container that it doesn't have a lid?
It might not hurt.
Yeah.
So can I ask if there's going to be a definition of adequate container capacity and what that capacity is relative to capacity provided for trash?
Well, one idea would be the lid can be shut at all times to prevent vectors. If you have inadequate capacity, the lid won't shut. That seems to me to be a concrete and effective definition.
That's a good point, Andy, though. We can make note that might need a bit more description or definition of that.
And I'm obviously not an employee of Metro, but I'm just thinking of like right now for single family, it's a 96 gallon trash container provided for every single family home and effectively 48 gallons of recycling provided a week since it's a 96 gallon provided every other week.
Mhm.
I don't know if you want that to be consistent or if it changes because it's multifamily and you're talking about dumpsters at this point rather than, I don't know if you want it to say like a 2-to-1 ratio or, if it needs to be closer to that, closer than that. But I think it would be helpful to have some representation of what that adequacy or comparison is.
Okay, except what you're talking about is the urban services district. There's a whole bunch of Jefferson County that does not meet those standards or exceeds those standards.
What do you mean?
It could be a minimum, though.
We do not have every other week. We do not have, people can buy their own containers. There's not a specific standard in the
Okay.
way that is articulated.
Yeah. Well, another definition could be not only that sufficient volume to allow the lid to be kept shut, but another one would be that it doesn't generate any litter or odor. Because in rental property, you have a higher incidence of people not bothering to wash things out. I mean, at some level, we just need to get something on paper and hold a public hearing and let people poke holes in it.
Mhm.
Right.
Tell us what idiots we are, and then we can fix it,
I think
And
those are all good
several
points,
of
though.
the,
I was going to say, I think those are
and-
going to come regardless of how airtight the language is.
Good argument.
Andy, one of the things I was thinking of in several of the examples that we read, there were options for people to select based on the size of the facilities and those types of things. That may be an option also.
I didn't follow, Brian. I'm replaying it, and I don't know.
Well, yeah, you know the reports that we read on different locations. There were a number that had options. People could select different sizes based on their needs.
Yeah.
So that was an option in some of the studies that we had reviewed as a group.
Yeah, and I don't think any of us feels the need to tell people that they should have a 5 or a 9 yard container. We would just want them to have enough capacity that people can put their stuff in without problems, right?
Yeah, and that's where I was going, Sarah Lynn, that there were options that people could select based on size and requirement. So
yeah,
Right.
so to me, if we are assuming that folks outside the urban service district especially are going to contract for services, that's between them and the haulers.
Yeah. I mean, I'm worried we're getting into too much detail, telling them how to do it, as opposed to just saying, here's what we would like.
Well, I thought that's what we just all agreed, that we weren't going to tell them how.
Okay.
It's what you're supposed to accomplish is what I'm concerned about describing.
Diane, can you scroll up so we can move past the containers one? Oh, sorry, down.
I'm sorry.
So the next section mentions diversion requirements for affected premises. On-site recycling material diversion services required under this article shall. And I know this wording on number 1 is there because that's what our current ordinance requires of the hauler. That's the minimum recycling that they have to allow people to recycle.
Did we say last time that we just want to quote everything separate in here? But then every time we change a type of plastic or something, we have to change our stuff, or just say whatever is required by a higher level Louisville Metro for
The latter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought that's what we don't want to have to keep changing every document. Just say we go along
That's
with
right.
what we go along with what the current Metro guidelines are.
We should put a citation so somebody could find it readily, but yes.
Yeah.
And then the requirement would be to provide receptacles, collection capacity, and storage areas.
I just want to point out it goes from 1 to 3. There is no 2.
Thank you.
I don't know what 2 was, but I can't figure out right.
I don't know. And then remove the recyclable materials by either transporting to a licensed MRF or contracting with a city licensed recycling service provider to transport it to. So I guess you can transport it yourself or get a licensed hauler to transport it to the licensed MRF.
Regarding item 2, I think we should make some reference to the code for screening these kind of things, just to remind everybody that Metro requires dumpsters to be screened in these multifamily context, ideally with a citation so they can find the rules.
How would we word that? I agree. So provide receptacles per code for screening.
I think it's a land development code, but I'm not sure on that account.
Well, can we just say code for now and get that?
Something, just,
Look into
yes,
it.
we can fill it in later, but yeah.
I would change it per and to per code, I think. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Oops. Is that okay?
Okay.
Yep. Well, say regarding screening or something so we can go back and fill it in.
Code for screening.
Mm-hmm. Screening code requirements or something. Because we don't want to make these people do something and then they turn around and get popped by a different department.
Oops. When you say screening, do you mean like it needs to be covered?
No, fenced. You're not
Oh, right,
supposed to have to
fenced.
look at the
Okay.
dumpster.
Okay.
You know, the thing the trucks back into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna put fence so I remember, because I'm not gonna guarantee that I remember.
Yeah. The ordinance calls it screening, but it is fencing.
Okay. So it could be just anything to hide it from,
Correct.
like, okay.
Does it have to be a solid fence or can you see through it?
You're allowed to do the chain link with those slats put in between the pieces, you know? But yeah, I don't think you're allowed to do something that's, you can see through because it doesn't really screen, and that's the
Right.
point.
That's what I
It's not a
thought.
security thing, but it's a visual or aesthetic thing.
Sorry, I haven't been that active on this subcommittee, but you're talking pretty much about a corral ordinance now when you reference screening. So there's going to have to be some pretty clear definitions as what is acceptable for that phrase you're utilizing as screening.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We should reference to the existing code that's elsewhere, and then we don't have to deal with it. Because, I mean, we can't do something contrary to it, so we might as well just reference to it and use it.
Okay.
Okay, so again, get rid of the and just say per existing code.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, except that small cities may have their own existing code.
Right.
I
Well,
know
then
we
that's,
do.
then that is the existing code.
I would agree,
Well,
as long as
except I
that
was-
recognition is there.
Okay.
Yeah, I was hoping we could put a citation to make it easier for folks to comply, but she's right that if do we know that actually other communities have?
I know that we do. I know Prospect does.
Separate, okay. Because I was hoping you'd say it was by reference to Metro Code, but
Never.
that was wildly optimistic.
Yes, it was.
To me, per existing
So I
code
would
covers
add-
however they're covered right now, whether it's Metro or their own. That's what we go with.
I would add, Greg, that there are numbers of communities, particularly large apartment communities, that do not screen at all. Many
Yeah,
that we
there's
would
a
collect.
grandfather clause. You know, if you were in existence before the code, you don't have to go back and do it.
Right. So that's what we're saying is
But I believe
okay.
that if you expand an existing corral, to use a better term perhaps, I think then you come into compliance or need to. But the code's gonna say again, the applicability. So in 3B, who does it mean city?
I guess maybe it should be district licensed.
That
since
would
we're
be
not-
my guess, yes.
the capital.
It should be parallel to the item above it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just waste district licensed.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume we're getting rid of the city completely, right?
We should.
Yeah, I think that's,
You want me to go ahead and do that, Greg?
yes, that was
Yep.
just a error.
Because Sandra, the small cities, or I forget the term for them now, but they don't license independently, correct?
Not to my knowledge. I can't speak for every other small city, but to my
Sure.
knowledge, they don't. It's a
Yeah.
question we'd have to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Because Shively and J-Town, for example, are
Yeah.
quite a bit larger than we are, and they might do something like that.
Shively used to have its own services even.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking that if we modify A1 by reference, then we don't even need C, correct? And oh, by the way, there's no B. There's two C's and no B. So
I was going to point that out when we get to it, that should be a B instead of a C, but
Yeah.
first column. Okay. Whoops.
Oop.
she's on it.
Oh, I know why, because it's already set up in a format, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we can,
So that's
the
why it goes.
syntax of this thing's a mess, but we can fix it later.
Yeah.
Make a separate note.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
So anyway, what I'm suggesting is that clause could go away if we modify A1 to reference that section.
Yeah, and the example that this came from, I feel like it would be odd to put a stipulation on something in this, but not have it in the other, another ordinance we're referring to, so.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, never mind.
Do you need me to do something, Karen?
All
No.
I thought 1 says collect and 3 says remove, so I don't know.
Well, you collect it on site, but then you have to get rid of it.
Right, so that's why there was a 1, 2, 3, but I don't know.
So maybe your parenthetic yellow B should say if needed at all. No, like Diane, I'm suggesting that
Oh.
this B clause is unnecessary if we fix A1.
Well, you're
Okay.
talking about the B under 3, not the main B.
This, well,
Sorry.
this-
Oh, yeah,
She's talking about the,
she's been talking about the sub B under 3.
okay.
no,
not the main.
no,
No,
not
no,
that.
I'm not. I'm talking about the first C that's parenthetically labeled the B underneath of there.
Oh,
This.
Yes, where it talks about the list of recyclables, I'm saying that if we go up to A1 and we reference this ordinance and massage the language, this whole section B for the first C can go away. It's unnecessary.
Right.
So maybe just cut and paste it up there and then clean it up.
Okay.
Yeah, there will be a lot of cleanup.
Oh, yeah. At least we only have one C now.
Yeah. It's funny, it didn't change to B.
I know, it's weird.
This one changed to B.
Look at that.
Okay, so scroll on so we can see what's coming. Oh, too far. So the district shall adopt rules that establish a process in which the responsible party for an affected premise can request a waiver of certain requirements, approval to comply through alternative means, approval to substitute another recyclable material in place of required recyclable material. That's, I don't know what,
Has that ever happened?
I don't know. Approval to comply with this article by sharing solid waste recycling diversion services. Approval for performing recycling materials diversion on site. So this is basically all the ways that they can try to not do what we ask.
Yeah, but I mean, unless somebody wants to take all of their hard copy newspapers to create garden space, how could they do anything on site, I wonder?
I don't know.
Some of this seems like it doesn't need to be in here.
Probably not. Like I said, this is kind of a conglomeration of examples, so we can certainly say.
I think that number 2 and number 4 are saying the same thing. I can't imagine if somebody.
do we need this whole B? I mean, was this just thrown in from something else?
You always have to have something in a rule to manage appeals for people who think they shouldn't have to apply, or that the rule shouldn't apply to them. That's normal. But number 2, approval to comply with alternate means. One example could be sharing a service with a nearby development. So I say we could take 4 out. B4.
Yeah, because there's no 5.
Well, there is oh, you're right, that too. Damn. And If none of us can think of an example of how you would divert these materials on site, I say we get rid of it.
Oh my gosh, Karen.
Are you tracking changes? Because if you were, you should just be deleting. Because you
Yeah.
can always bring it back, but it's okay.
I'll just delete.
And I wonder if that last one didn't come from some sample ordinance that included food waste or something like that.
That could be. Because I think if anything we were looking at, we were trying to go ahead and remove any organics kind of stuff.
Yeah.
How close are we to the bottom? I forget how long this document is.
That's it.
Okay. So we're down
So
to
just a
down
few
to about
minutes
3
here.
minutes. 3-minute warning.
The next section is about education, and I think it's just this idea that they have to actually tell the people living there that not only do you have this service, but what's accepted, and then possibly trying to keep things. That's when we can try to use consistent materials.
And labeling.
Mm-hmm.
We're missing a B here too.
Well,
So, and I think it does have the special rule that like I think this combines other types of businesses, but if you're focusing on tenants or whatever, all tenants, sorry, scroll back up to what
I'm
I
sorry.
believe is A. So you have to provide recycling information and instructions annually. So that means no matter what, according to this, you have to share the rules annually. But then you also have to share it with anyone that's newly coming in. And then that's when they have a rule no later than the maybe 30th day or something after the tenant occupies.
And we want to take these business references out, right?
Yes,
And
that would be a
employee
thing to do.
references.
Do you all think that a rule about a certain number of days, like when someone moves in, I guess?
Yeah, I'd say no more than 14.
Mm.
Because when you move in, you generate a lot of cardboard boxes and packing. 3 wouldn't be inappropriate.
Yeah.
Hell, we could just tell them attach it to the lease.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I don't
It
think
should
people
be
read
part of
the
what they're telling
leases.
them when they move in.
Yeah.
Well, I think I know we're running out of time, but I think an important thing was just to get through this as a subcommittee so we know that we're kind of on the right track with the right information, even if we spend a little more time trying to clean it up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So are we at a point to give this to the?
Except I want to retract my 14 days when I think about people who move in and have so many cardboard boxes and stuff. I think it ought to be no later than the 3rd day, and it ought to be before, really.
Do we need to even specify that?
Can we can say, before they move in, you got to tell them where they're supposed to put all that stuff, because that's a lot of stuff.
I think we can look for some wording about that, like more like it's part of the agreement.
Yeah.
Here's your keys, here's your recycling information, here's your parking spot.
To me, trying to say 1 day, 2 days, 5 days, it's too detailed.
Yeah.
Well, if there's no sense in writing a rule you can't enforce.
Right. Well,
So if we aren't going to enforce it, we don't need it. But if we expect it to be enforced, we got to have specifics.
And then there is the section about English and Spanish. I mean, we're generally, I know I'm trying to keep things Spanish, and then also just the universal symbols or images being consistent. So everybody sees the same thing. And then do you agree that, anything for landfill, any trash should be marked landfill trash, or does that matter? I think that was just,
I have to say, when I'm in places where they have those labels, I guess taught at U of L's law school on Monday night, and it was awfully nice to know it had landfill and recycling. It told me exactly where to put stuff.
Right. Trash
Okay.
is something somebody's done with.
Right.
Landfill goes someplace, recycle
Yeah.
goes someplace. I agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Or trash, I don't think we want to use it as landfill or recycle.
Okay.
Have a
And then-
contractor who's arrived. I need to go downstairs and talk to him. I'll be back at least at 4:30.
All right, that's
I think we
4:13. What else do we want to do?
I think we can wrap it up, Greg, if you want. And there's a lot for us to look at as staff just to clean this up, so we can do that before the next meeting.
At the advisory committee, we're just going to say that the document is going through a couple of revisions we worked on, and we're ready to present it next month. Or yay, nay?
Yeah.
All right,
I don't know.
think about it. Okay, anything else anybody wants to bring up? Any new business or anything else they want to bring up? Okay, so if I make a motion to adjourn our meeting? Some of you may be muted. Most of you are. All right. I'll make a motion to adjourn a meeting. Anyone second? Anybody on the committee that can second that?
A second.
Thank you.
Oh, who? Julie Donna? Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you for attending, and see everybody at the
Yep.
advisory committee
Minute.
in 10 minutes. Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.